How is everyone doing? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us again for another episode of Chasing Clarity Health and Fitness Podcast. Brandon, was that really good or what?
You finally nailed it, my man, because last week you left us hanging. You took over my intro, first and foremost. I want everyone out in the audience to know, before we went live with Alan Aragon last week for last week's episode, I told Jeff, hey, listen, I have a relationship with Alan. I've went back and forth with him for years. Would you like me to do the intro? And he goes, yeah, of course. The minute that he pressed record, he already jumped on it. You know what I mean? And then the week prior, he forgot to name the show. He went right into, yo, B, what's up? And so this week, Jeff, yes, that was good. Thank you for welcoming us. Thank you for being here and for doing the intro, to the best of your ability, my man. I appreciate it.
Look, dude, I've just been doing this a long time and I just flow with friends and be honest with you, old habits die hard, Brandon. That's all I'm going to say. And I'll leave it there.
I think it doesn't help that you and I have like a 25-minute powwow before this. It almost feels like we've already been recording. That's what the audience doesn't know. There's times, like for instance, I said something last week about the fact that I had a client that I did an energy audit with. And I told her, I want you to track and record everything that you eat this week that isn't attached to your husband.
I fucking died.
I honestly did not realize, everyone in the audience, if anyone took that offensively, please don't. It was something that I said to a client I have a good relationship with. It wasn't meant to be offensive. However, I didn't realize I said that live. And so I started getting tagged on stories on Instagram with that caption. And I said, holy Lord, they know what I said to my client. And then I said, oh, I said that live. So, guys, thanks for reminding me. Hey, it happens. This is brutal, honest, and this is part of Chasing Clarity. We're being we're being transparent as can be.
Yeah, you guys get to see two bros just hanging out, having good conversation on complex topics, is how I like to say. Before we get into episode 13, which is a hell of a topic, I'll be honest. After we did that one from Alan, we could have gone into a break for a few months and just taken a hibernation because that episode was so good, but knowing us, we just had to keep digging and diving. So it brings us back to the table for number 13. But how has your last 7 days been, man? How was your fourth and everything?
Yeah, honestly, everything's been going well, my man. I've completed another week in this mini cut phase. And since the last podcast, I actually had my international magazine cover and article with Center Stage Magazine go live. So that just got released, I believe, on Thursday. So that was, previous to our last record or after our last recording. And even just within, that's been 4 days, guys, we record on Tuesdays, just so you know, so you'll be listening to this on a Friday. However, within the last 4 days, I've been contacted by, numerous photographers who want to shoot me over the course of the summer. So I'm actually going to adjust my plan of attack in terms of this mini cut goes. So instead of doing the mini cut as I initially had described to the audience and to you, Jeff, I was going to initially do it for 6 weeks and then go right back into a muscle building phase. But I'm actually going to implement, and I'm already implementing a diet break this week where I'm going to bring my calories back up to maintenance intake to dissipate some of the dietary fatigue that I've accumulated. Because like I was describing to you, over the last couple of weeks, I took a rapid rate of loss and I also used an aggressive deficit for the past 4 weeks. So I'm going to do this diet break. Then I'm going to transition back into a fat loss focus phase, but I'm going to slow my weekly rate of loss from the 1.25% of total body weight loss per week that I've been hitting the last 4 weeks. I'm going to slow it down due to the fact that my dieting phase is now going to go longer than the initial 6 weeks that I had expected. So this is just me being transparent with everyone because I have been getting a lot of feedback on the mini cut update. So just giving you guys an updated notice of where I'm at. And this actually worked out better, to be honest with you, because last summer, as you remember, I had surgery and I was unable to train all summer. I wasn't able to do any photo shoots. And that's something I've always really enjoyed. I've been in Men's Fitness Magazine, Muscular Development, all these different things. And it wasn't that I was chasing those accolades, but I just really like I've always been a very goal-oriented individual, and I'm both intrinsically driven, but also extrinsically driven. So intrinsically, I want to be the best version of myself and everything that I pursue, whether it's coaching, whether it's my physique development, whether it's my dietary skills that I develop each and every time that I go into a deficit. But also, I do like having something to shoot for. And since I have not competed in the last 3 years, I really have found photo shoots to be a good target for me, to really be able to set my eyes and my sights on something and really aim towards something. And so, with this change of plans, a lot of people would be thrown off. So I told, some of my clients and I told some of my friends, oh, I'm going to transition out of this mini cut. I'm going to go into a diet break, and then I'm going to go into a longer fat loss phase. And I'm sure people like this. They're so like anal retentive and like type A that any change of plans, it's like the end of the world. And I'm actually the exact opposite. I'm type A. I'm very OCD. I'm very detail oriented, but I don't mind these type of changes, especially because I've actually found over the last few years that I get a better response to fat loss phases when I start with a larger deficit off the bat, which is essentially what I did with the mini cut. And so, I essentially will use a larger deficit when my body fat and my calories are higher, and then I'll usually slow down my rate of fat loss over the course of the phase once I get leaner. So the approach I found to be most beneficial both for myself and many of my clients is to start off a bit quicker and with a larger relative deficit, and then transition to a moderate rate of loss and eventually to a slower rate of loss by the end of the diet. Because what a lot of people don't realize, and comes from like a physiology of fat loss perspective, is the amount of body fat we have determines how much fatty acids we can mobilize and make available to burn for energy. So it makes sense to start off a fat loss phase by losing more fat up front and gaining that momentum. You get some wins, you get some motivation from it, and then you slow down the rate of loss throughout the course of the diet when we have less body fat and we're more susceptible to muscle loss. So, this is what I'm going to be transitioning into, and I'm looking forward to having a productive season of photo shoots and hopefully land a couple more covers, because I do have some projects in the works of doing some writing for some different publications.
Oh, dude, congratulations. I still think you should take these photo covers and turn them to OnlyFans content. $4.95, bro. Just charge for the covers.
I don't
Money
know,
out
man.
there is insane.
What's
I'll manage your OnlyFans. It'd be great. Like, I'll be shady.
You just want that kickback.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I'll wear aviators. I'll make it look cool. But I'm glad you're enjoying yourself, because I remember last summer you were just like, the fuck. And I was like, it's okay, man. You just got to get through this. So
no, absolutely. It's been a couple of years. I have not done any photo shoots since the summer of 2020, but also I had that car accident in the end of 2020. And then I essentially couldn't really train like regularly for the most of the year. And then I went down to Nashville for the PEC, what was that, 4 at the time? And I celebrated with you guys. And then right after that, the week after I got back from Nashville last year, I had surgery, and then I was out for 12 weeks rehabbing. And so the whole summer I essentially had to spend indoors besides my walks. And I wasn't able to train, and I wasn't able to do the things that I love. So I saw a regression both in my physique, but also my mental health as a result, because training isn't just an extension of me physically. It's an extension of me mentally, spiritually. It helps my well-being. It helps my mood state. So, and I'm sure there's so many out there, within the audience and you yourself that can relate to that. So it's just really good to be back into a progressive swing of things, having a goal, having the ability to even train. I'm super fortunate and grateful just for that. But tell me, how was your past week, and then also your July 4th, my man?
So I was off work from Thursday afternoon all the way through this morning. I did not go to the gym at all. I was off of email pretty much, except for little tidy stuff. And I committed to writing for the entire time and busted out 11,900 words over the course of the 4 days I had to sit down. So, and it turned out to be pretty much an entire chapter-ish that I did not think I would even put in the book or try to put into the book. So I'm going into scribe in a really good position. I have the end of July. My older sister is watching Keegan for me for a few days. So I'm going to have another little spurt where I could probably get another 10, 15,000 words done, hopefully in that range, ahead of Austin. So I should be at the 70,000 K mark when I hit Austin.
Now, for the audience, tell us what your target is or what your goal is in terms of total length of the book itself.
Ooh, I don't know. I thought really I'd probably get 60,000 words, but now I look more like 70, 80. Okay. I don't want it to be above 80 because I don't think anyone will enjoy I think the best books I've enjoyed are under 300 pages. Especially when you're telling a story and things like that. I think that's the best one. If you're really getting into it. And then otherwise, 4th of July was good. And then today I am the proud father of a 16-year-old son. So he turned 16 today. So it's been cool chatting with him for a little bit and kind of getting all that going. And got some good news. We had the biggest month ever for Iron House in June. And when we promoted Katie up and I moved Thera to chief of staff and made her kind of relinquish her role as general manager, Katie has done a phenomenal job just upping the total revenue every single month. So we are going into Jason Coley coming down from Relentless, who we formally announced. As you know, that was working on the back channel. So we are in a great spot when we get him in Nashville that we will be able to really explode and get to gym number 2 quicker. And if you're a coach listening to this and you're interested in in-person coaching with online hybrid, like myself and Jason Coley and us do, we're looking for good people and be more than happy to welcome you down here to Nashville, a growing city with a booming economy. It's almost like recession proof. It's kind of crazy, but it's all good stuff, man. I have no complaints in my world. But let's get into the episode today so we can make sure we have our time to cover it, because, we've only got an hour before people tune out on us. So today is episode 13. We're going to talk about leveraging the thermic effect of food. Now, what we're going to discuss is how food quality, nutrient timing, meal timing, insulin sensitivity, and body fat levels will impact your total daily energy expenditure, other known as your TDEE. So we're going to begin with number 1, factors that impact TEF. So that's your thermogenic effect of food, meaning when you consume food, you're going to burn calories from consuming food. So it's always a benefit to eat whole food over maybe say whey shakes and things like that. But
well, we're going to get into that, my friend. You might be shocked by some of the information that I'm going to.
I know I'm a big time whey drinker. You've seen that. I do 3 shakes a day and 2 meals.
I may be actually encouraging you as well as others in the audience this week. So we're going to take a deeper dive into this topic than I've seen anyone else do. And that's just my style and something that I'm trying to bring to, we're both trying to bring to the audience that we don't see at other podcasts. Really, guys, just so you know, like people often ask me, like, how do I know this kind of stuff? I am just relentless in terms of my pursuit of knowledge, and I will spend hours upon hours on a weekend, and Jeff can confirm this, digging into things. I've also been to every educational seminar that you could think of throughout the country. So this is an accumulated wealth of knowledge of 15 years in this industry, and just really trying to dig deeper and really peel back the layers of the onion, both from an educational perspective, but then also I remember things so well because I practically apply them to clients in the trenches, and I've worked with over 1,000 people, and Jeff can confirm this. When you not only educate yourself, but you take that knowledge that you learn from your books, from your courses, from the research, and then you apply it to real world people and you see how it works, or maybe it doesn't work, it really sticks with you. So you're able to not only take that knowledge and ingrain it into your head, but it becomes part of your coaching practices. So it becomes something that you do not forget about. Whereas there are a lot of people that are just simply book smart, and they might know a fact for a week or 2 weeks, but you ask them about that 6 months down the road, and because they never use that knowledge, I always say knowledge is useless unless it's applied. So we want applicable knowledge, and that's really what we're trying to get across on this podcast.
100%. So what are the factors that impact the thermogenic effect of food then?
All right. So throughout this series so far, we've discussed how to optimize and increase your metabolism. And before last week's episode, where we had our special guest, Alan Aragon, on, we discussed part 1 of how nutrition impacts our metabolism. And so in the context of nutrition, metabolism refers to the process by which our body converts food to energy to both sustain life and fuel our activities. So these metabolic processes include transporting nutrients to cells, use of energy by our muscles and cells, eliminating waste products from our body, and then also digesting food through the thermic effect of feeding, which is what we're going to primarily focus on today's episode. So there are a few factors that impact our thermic effect of feeding, or the amount of calories we burn from our meals. The first is going to be the macronutrient composition of the meal, which we already discussed in part 1 of this series in terms of, how nutrition affects your total daily energy expenditure. And your macronutrient breakdown of your diet is going to be the most impactful factor, and the one that most people discuss, which is what we went over in episode 11. But there are several other factors that many overlook, which include the level of processing a food has undergone, the nutrient and meal timing within our diets, and then our level of insulin sensitivity and body fat, which is what we're going to cover today.
I have a question for you. What are your thoughts on processed food versus eating more natural and more organic? How does that play out in the studies? Because I've only seen very, very few. I haven't really seen much. Yep.
I know. I'm going to be honest. You got to really dive deep into the literature to see this, but I always say this. We always hear this expression, all calories are created equal. And everyone in the audience has heard that. And yes, all calories are created equal from a unit of energy perspective. But what I really try to get across to everyone when I speak on these topics, and especially to my clients, is not all sources of calories are created equal, especially from a thermic effect of feeding and energy expenditure perspective. And this is especially true with what you're asking about, Jeff. When we compare whole foods, which are usually single ingredient, minimally processed foods, against processed foods, which are like refined foods that have a longer ingredient list, we see that the more processed a food is, the less of a thermic effect it has in comparison to an unprocessed whole food source. So when you eat whole foods in their unprocessed state, they have a higher thermic effect of feeding. So you essentially net out less calories from them as compared to their processed counterparts, which affects both the calories in and calories outside of the energy balance equation. And we have multiple lines of research that compare different levels of food processing and the effect that they have on their metabolism. So, for example, there was a study, I believe it's by Barr, where they compared the post-meal energy expenditure between a whole and unprocessed food meal with a processed food meal that were equal in terms of both their calories and their macros. So the only difference between these two meals where they gave, subjects both meals was their level of processing. And so in the whole food condition, they had healthy participants eat a multi-grain bread and cheddar cheese sandwich. Whereas in the processed food condition, they had those same subjects eat a white bread sandwich with what they called was a processed cheese product. But when you look into like the actual methodology of the study, what I got from it was like Velveeta cheese. So it's like fake cheese. You know what I
Fuck
mean?
yeah.
Like,
yeah.
So yeah, it's a processed, multi-ingredient, like long laundry list
Yeah.
type of cheese. So this is the result, the results of the study. In the whole food condition, when they measured the post-meal calorie burn from both these meals, they found that the whole foods sandwich increased energy expenditure by nearly 50% more as compared to the processed sandwich. So in the whole food condition, that meal had a thermic effective feeding of 20%, whereas with the processed food meal, it had a thermic effect of 10.7%. So, I was looking over this study, and I've known about this study for a long period of time, but my thought is this difference may have been even larger if we were to take, say, the processed food meal, like the processed sandwich, and then compared it to a high protein meal of, say, lean protein and fibrous vegetables, which would increase the thermic effect even higher. So we could have seen it like a larger discrepancy. And then there's also a few other examples in the literature of how eating whole foods that contain fiber increase the thermic effect and actually decrease the amount of what's called metabolizable energy that we absorb from foods. And just for everyone out there, metabolizable energy refers to the amount of energy that is absorbed across the intestine that we don't excrete out or burn. So these are the actual calories that we actually absorb in the GI tract. Because what a lot of people don't realize, and Jeff, I'm sure you know this, the GI tract's actually outside of our body. So until a nutrient is actually absorbed, it isn't considered calories in. So we can't really count those calories until it's been,
Broken down and assimilated.
Exactly. So one study found that the fibrous matrix of almonds doesn't allow all the calories in it to be absorbed as compared to consuming almonds in a processed form like an almond butter. So in this study, they found that when they fed subjects a specific amount of almonds, that the actual calories they absorbed were 32% less than expected based, when they compared it to the same amount of calories fed from almond butter. And we also see a similar effect in studies that compare peanuts versus peanut butter and then also peanut oil. And so we extract less calories from peanuts than from peanut butter and peanut oil because peanuts are harder to absorb, and thus we don't get as many calories from them as compared to the processed versions of them. And so, a lot of people will look at this type of stuff or they're unaware of this, and it doesn't really register to them. But essentially, this is an easy way for us to cut out calories without actually cutting down on food volume or satiety, because you're still chewing these nutrients, you're still taking them in. And what I find is funny is within the fitness industry, especially, a lot of people tend to eat nut butters over whole nuts. However, when you eat peanut butter as compared to whole peanuts, your body actually absorbs 10 to 20% more calories than in its unprocessed whole form. So just by switching from a nut butter to a whole raw form of nut, you can cut down the amount of metabolizable energy you get out of them by, say, 10 to 20%. And another, example of how whole foods have a higher thermic effect of feeding is seen when we compare diets that are composed of either whole grains versus refined grains. So for example, there was a 2017 study, I believe, where they found that eating the same amount of calories from whole grains in terms of their carbohydrate intake, netted 92 calories less per day than compared to eating refined grains. And now this is where we're going to go back to protein, because we know that protein has the highest thermic effect of feeding. And Jeff, like myself, is a big fan of whey isolate, a big fan of protein powders because of the convenience, because of the
Right.
bioavailability, because of the leucine content. So it hits the leucine threshold and it simulates muscle protein synthesis very effectively. And the one exception, because what we have to realize is that technically whey protein is processed. It's a processed food. It is extracted from a milk product. And so the one exception to the thermic effect of feeding in terms of a processed food having less of a thermic effect of feeding is actually with protein powders, as this is like the one example I could find in the literature where a processed food actually has a higher thermic effect than most whole foods. So I know that Jose Antonio, I was at the ISSN conference years ago, and he did a poster presentation on a study that he did with whey protein, which Jose Antonio is also who we referred back to about the protein overfeeding studies. And in one of them, he had exercise trained guys and girls consume 30 grams of whey protein after training and saw that the thermic effect was between 35 and 40%. So when we look at that, that is even higher than we generally see in whole food proteins. So generally, just overall, guys, the foods that are higher in protein or higher in fiber will have a higher thermic effect than something that's processed and refined, as processed foods don't require as much energy to digest. So we absorb a higher amount of calories from them. And this is where it's to our advantage to consume more whole foods, besides the fact that they're more micronutrient rich, they're more satiating, because just by the fact that they're less processed, they exhibit a higher thermic effect of feeding. So we burn more energy in the process of digesting and assimilating and absorbing them. So someone with a whole food diet, like a mostly whole foods diet, is going to have a higher thermic effect than someone consuming the same amount of calories from processed foods. And as a result of that higher thermic effect, they're actually going to be netting out less calories and burning more calories as a result. So this is an easy way to get your body to effortlessly burn more calories just due to your food choices. And this is really where it comes down to, when we speak about, and Jeff and I have went over this in previous episodes, it's not just about quantity, it's also about the quality of the food that you choose, and where, really making sure to leverage the fact that we want to utilize whole food, nutrient rich, low energy density foods can really make it really provide you with a lot of advantages, especially when it comes to fat loss.
100%. Actually, I wanted to chime in on two things. I'm obviously 17 years of coaching people and so forth. When you get older, your digestion just gets harder. Like, I train people that are 50, 60. It's like, yeah, it's just harder to eat. And that's why I've gone over to more protein shakes. It's just easier, the convenience. It's easier on my gastric emptying and things like that. Like I don't get bloated. I don't feel as bad for the amount of protein I need to get. So be sure to consider that. Like if you're over the age of 40, 45, there's no reason to just keep piling food into your stomach and getting a stretched out belly, because then you have to like work your ass off to reverse all that back off and, do the exercise, like, work your transverse abdominis and everything else to pull that back in. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on, I was curious your thoughts on this. So as you know, Brandon, if you guys listen, he's really into the research study, and I read a lot of the books. So we have like a compare and contrast model to what we've seen and what we've done. What do you feel? And actually, Brandon, I'm curious on this. With the processed food, you see a lot in the books, they talk about something known as the magnesium burn rate. And it's, the idea that the more processed food you eat, the more you burn through magnesium. And therefore, when you start burning through magnesium, you start getting a plethora of other problems. Is there anything in the research that shows that when you're eating these processed foods, it's burning out the micronutrients even more, which therefore it's leaving you more and more of a deficit? I know we talked about this on past podcasts, but is there anything in relation to what you're talking about, like with TEF, the thermogenic effect of food, that shows when you start pulling these micronutrients out, it's actually going against you?
No, so what we do see in the literature is that we see less micronutrient density, meaning for a specific amount of food. So say we have 100 grams of food, or say a 400 calorie allotment of a processed food versus a whole food, we're going to have much more micronutrients within the whole foods that are unprocessed, even if the processed foods have fortified minerals and vitamins added to them because they're not as bioavailable. So that's the first thing. We see less micronutrient density, and it's less of a micronutrient rich food source. But also really what we see in the literature, the only time I've seen magnesium depletion looked at in the research was actually in athletic populations, where we see the burn rate being 10 to 20% higher than your average population.
Correct.
That's also because we're excreting through sweat. So, and we also know that much of our soil is depleted. So we're actually not absorbing a lot of, first of all, we're not getting the same amount of magnesium that is listed on the labels. So that's one thing. Even in whole food sources, what is labeled on spinach or on greens or on a lot of your sources of magnesium are actually not really being absorbed and utilized by the body. So within that, that's why magnesium is one of the number one nutrient deficiencies. And one of the things that I supplement with all clients.
Yeah, I actually, magnesium is responsible for over 600 body processes, at least, that they
it's funny. So, I've been in the supplement industry for a very long time. I worked in the supplement industry for 14 years. And when I first got into the supplement industry, it was known that magnesium contributed to 350 chemical processes. And every 5 years, we've seen that number increase by 100.
It literally is high as hell now.
I really think that, in 10, 20 years time, we're going to see that number over 1,000 because there are so many linkages to insulin resistance, to, calcium channeling, to contraction, to relaxation, to parasympathetic nervous system activity, to GABAergic signaling. So calming down
the heart
your brain,
disease as well.
Everything. There are so many things involved with magnesium. That is why, besides the fact that it's one of our number one, most common nutrient or micronutrient deficiencies within the American and within the worldwide population, actually, it's another reason why I think it's such a vital mineral and a macro mineral at that, meaning we need it in larger quantities than, say, your copper and your zinc and your smaller micronutrients. But it's one of the other reasons why I utilize it in everyone's plan, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I had actually, that was, the idea of sweating out your micronutrients. That's what sold me with James Di Nicolantio with the Salt Fix, talking about iodine, how you sweat out up to 100 micrograms per hour. So it's like, okay, that makes sense. I can see how people who overexercise would have hypothyroidism just strictly based on, the lack of nutrients that they're replenishing.
Also, think about many people are not consuming things that are high in iodine. People aren't eating and things of that sort. So they're not even if they weren't sweating it out, most people are micronutrient deficient in iron and iodine to begin with, because we've also seen a demonization of table salt. So we know that table salt was initially formulated to help with goiter and things that were essentially coming from iodine deficiencies. And because people have demonized the caking agents, which actually, if you look into the meta-analyses on iodized table salt, we do not see deleterious effects from them, despite them having little microplastics in some products and things of that sort. But a lot of people have steered away from that and went to sea salt, which I enjoy. I just like the taste better of sea salt, but I make sure that we're getting some sort of iodine in the diet. And I personally utilize sea salt or table salt multiple times a day to hit that iodine threshold, because I do know, A, I'm very active, and B, I'm a heavy sweater. So I excrete a lot of minerals within my, within my workouts and throughout the course of my days.
I know that the moment I started shoving my iodine up over 200, now I'm around 300 a day, I feel amazing. And I think that that's a sweet spot for a lot of people who do hard training, especially if you're down here in the South with the humidity and stuff like that. You definitely probably want to do it. But I was also going to back up and say that Hummel, when he talked about copper, that was the other thing he mentioned. Like, look how many foods don't have copper. Look at how much you could sweat copper out like that. Like, no wonder you have a copper deficiency. So, when you really look at all this, like if you go through the grocery store and you look at the back of the labels, compared to the whole foods, that pretty much tells the tale of the tape. Like I tell my clients, like, you really need to be thinking about that, especially about iron, men in iron, because they'll get a lot of foods that are fortified in iron. They'll be getting 14, cereals, 16, 18 milligrams a day. And I'm like, you're thickening up your blood. That's not a good idea. So, that's a whole episode we could do on that one, the iron overload epidemic, but we won't get into the weeds too much on that one. Now, we've talked about factors that impact TEF. We talked about the difference between whole foods and processed foods, but now it's probably time in the order of operations to break down how nutrient and meal timing impacts the thermogenic effect of food, because depending upon how you utilize food, the prescription you write for yourself with it can be the greatest sword you live by and the greatest sword you die by as well.
Absolutely. So another factor that impacts the thermic effect of feeding that we get from our meals, which I have yet to hear anyone else cover. So I'm bringing it to you. I'm not going to say I was the first by any means, but I've been deep into this literature. I'm
Come
very
on,
into
baby.
nutrient
You
timing.
can say you're the
But
first.
one of the things that does impact the thermic effect of feeding that we get from our meals is our nutrient timing and also the consistency of times in which we eat our meals.
Agreed.
So a recent study, actually a 2022 study, looked at the consistency of meal times and the impact that changing this can have on our thermic effect of feeding. So what they did was they had participants do a crossover trial, meaning each participant went through each leg or condition of the study. And so in one condition, they had them consume their 6 meals at consistent times each day over the course of a 2-week period. Then at the end of that 2-week period, they tested their thermic effect of feeding to a test meal and measured how much it was. And then what they did was they put them through a 2-week washout period where they had them eat normally. It wasn't a controlled diet, but they still ate their regular meal times. And so then in the next condition, they put them in a feeding condition where they varied their meal times throughout the course of the day throughout these 2 weeks. So what they did was they wanted to mimic what the average American does, where they eat, one day they'll eat 3 to 4 meals, some days they'll eat 6 meals, but it's not always at the same time of day, because a lot of people, their schedules change day to day. They're constantly varied in terms of how they eat and their eating schedule, and they don't follow a consistent meal schedule. So that's what they did within the study. So some days they'd have them eat 6 meals per day. On others, they'd have them eat 3 to 4 meals per day, which honestly is something, Jeff, I'm sure you can attest to this with lifestyle clients. It's something I find many clients doing when they first come to me. They don't have a routine. They don't have a set schedule. And that's one thing I really like to integrate with them, just so we have some habitual habits. And we also know that through the research on hunger hormones, that ghrelin, which is our main hunger hormone, is entrained by our meal timing. So you will feel hungry 30 to 60 minutes before a meal when you eat at consistent times. So that's a way we can hack our hunger, by keeping those consistent times, so that we don't have these massive swings and overlaps where then we're extra hungry and we overcompensate for those hunger by, say you miss a meal time and you go an extended period of time, and now you have compensatory eating behaviors as a result of that. So
can I inject real quick?
Yeah.
Actually, I wanted to say, I think that hypoglycemia is not talked about as much as hyper. And that's usually the issues. What I mean by that is, like with women, they get their hormone damage, quotes, from missing meals and not eating right. So what happens is you get these massive swings. So usually you're right. You have to set them on a schedule to help them get out of their issues with their hormones, get them feeling better and get them more stable. So you're 100% right. If people are missing meals, hypoglycemia turns to be more of a problem than the actual hyper issue for most people.
Yeah. So, in the context of women, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. So, Jeff, we are not going to go down this. I'm going to say one comment. We're going to keep it moving, because I know that I'll say this word and you're going to want to jump on it. And I'm going to warn the audience, he's not allowed to say anything after this. But what we do see within women, in the context of women missing meals, is that we see that in fasting trials, including intermittent fasting trials, that women have a less beneficial response to intermittent fasting because they have a higher cortisol elevation as a result of it. So it skews not only their hormones, but their hunger hormones. And then also think about it, cortisol is an energy liberating hormone. It's helping to dump blood glucose into the bloodstream. So we're seeing, these compensatory mechanisms that could cause overeating, extra hunger, lightheadedness, all these things. So it's not only a physiological response, but it's also impacting them from a psychological response. So we just see both from like a mental perspective as well as a physical perspective, that in terms of energy availability, we really want consistent meal times with females, because from an evolutionary perspective, they were meant to be here for survival. So they're more susceptible to what are called perturbations in energy availability. So when they go long periods of time without calories and without energy being fueled or being sourced to them, they do have more hormonal disruptions. We see that their leptin levels, which is an energy availability hormone, they decrease much more readily than with men. They have thyroid drop-offs much quicker than men. So these are just little things to take into consideration for those that don't follow a consistent meal schedule. But back to the study. So what I was talking about previously was they did the 2-week intervention when they did their varied meal schedule. And so at the end of that 2-week condition, they tested their thermic effect of feeding again to the same test meal that they had previously tested them with. And when they compared the thermic effect of feeding of the subjects in the consistent meal and nutrient timing condition compared to the inconsistent meal timing pattern, they found that it was 27% higher when they were maintaining a consistent and regular eating routine, which, if done over a longer period of time, would equate to a 5 to 10% total increase in their total daily thermic effect of feeding. So this is a big, this is a big lever we can pull by just staying consistent, and just, it's going to help with hunger regulation. It's going to help with blood sugar regulation. It's going to help you, stick to a pattern which you can integrate into your lifestyle and habits. These little habits that you can integrate will really help you not only adhere to your diet better, but also, schedule it into the context of your lifestyle. And this is huge.
Do you think, okay, so we went over with women because, that's big demographic in our industry, but with men, how should they be? Is there any differences that they should be considering versus women, how they structure the meal timing and their nutrients based upon TEF? Or is it basically goal dependent is what you would go with?
No, I think they should be consistent. I'm not saying you have to eat 4 meals per day. You have to eat 6 meals per day. What I'm saying is, if something fits your schedule, stick to it. Regular meal times, regular meal schedules. I really do like nutrient timing in terms of peri-workout nutrition,
Correct.
Sandwiching your workout, having a pre-workout meal with adequate, protein and carbohydrates. So you have both amino acid, hyper amino acidemia. So amino acids available in the bloodstream, as well as glucose availability to fuel your resistance training session, since resistance training is a glycolytic activity. And then post-workout, having proteins and carbohydrates as well. And just staying consistent with it, because that's such an easy thing. Think about it, guys. You're increasing your total daily energy expenditure by 5 to 10% just by being consistent within the times that you eat. That's a simple win. These are easy things that we're stacking up for you guys to increase your total daily energy expenditure, or the amount of calories you burn per day. And that 5 to 10%, say that your total daily energy expenditure is 2,000 calories per day, just, for a female. That's an extra potential 100 to 200 calories you could be burning per day. And it's something so simple as just being consistent. So it's going to help in every single aspect of life. It's going to help metabolically. It's going to help not only metabolically from like a metabolism perspective, but also from a metabolic health perspective with blood sugar regulation. It's going to help from an adherence perspective. It's going to help from a scheduling and integration into your lifestyle perspective. So these are so many different benefits that you really can leverage by just following a consistent routine.
Subpart to this, is there any way that they should be arranging their macronutrients as far as meal timing and nutrient timing to impact their TEF? Meaning, should they do, like we've already talked about peri-workout, but how should they do their fat? Should they do protein evenly across the meals? Should they do fats evenly across the meals to prevent the blood sugar dips? How do you kind of correlate that to them? Because, that'll probably be a question will be asked about that, because people get into the weeds on this stuff.
Yeah, that would be a completely different podcast, my man. That would be a nutrient timing podcast, and it wouldn't relate to the thermic effect of feeding. So that would be something that we could definitely get into later. I will tell you, just from a macronutrient, a big down breakdown, we want to have adequate protein feedings.
Correct.
4 to 6 times per day. Optimally, you want a sufficient leucine threshold within each meal to maximally stimulate muscle protein synthesis. And just by getting a higher protein intake, it's going to leverage that thermic effect of feeding, since it does have the highest thermic effect. But then when it comes to fats, we really see an inconsequential impact of fat intake on thermic effect of feeding, because it has between a 0 and 3% thermic effect of feeding. So when you time your fats, besides keeping them outside the workout window, because they do slow gastric motility and absorption of nutrients, it's going to be spread them out as you see fit.
Cool. All right. Just want to make sure, because you know how people like to read between the lines. Now, let's talk about the most skipped meal of the day, breakfast. What is the impact it has on your TDEE when you have breakfast, I guess?
All right. So I know intermittent fasting is super popular right now, so I might break some hearts with this. But here's the thing, guys. Although meal timing isn't as important as the quality of your diet or your total calorie intake, once you have those areas dialed in, which I'll tell you, all the clients that I work with, that's the first things I work on. I'm looking at the quantity and quality of their foods. So once we get that dialed in, what other levers can we pull? What other, keys can we utilize to help? And one of the things that we can do is considering the meal and nutrient timing, as this can be beneficial, especially when it comes to effortlessly increasing your total daily energy expenditure. And there's a large body of literature that shows that front loading more of our calories during the earlier parts of the day is more beneficial both from an energy expenditure perspective and an insulin sensitivity perspective. So it's helping us on both metabolic fronts. It's helping you expend more calories as well as absorb nutrients better, because there's a higher thermic effect of feeding during meals eaten earlier in the day as compared to at night. And we also see something called the second meal effect. So it's been shown that if we consume either a high protein and or carb containing meal in the morning, our blood glucose response to lunch is better, and we have improved blood sugar control in response to that next meal, to that second meal. That's why they call it the second meal effect, as compared to if we fast in the morning. And this allows us to be more insulin sensitive, so our muscles will take up more glucose without needing as much insulin. So eating breakfast is beneficial, even just from a metabolic health perspective. And then we also see in observational data that regular breakfast consumers have been shown to be less likely to be overweight. And so these are correlational things. But here's the thing: we also have other research that is, randomized controlled trials that have shown the benefits of eating breakfast. So for instance, there was a series of randomized controlled trials done by James Betts at the University of Bath. And what he did was he compared groups that ate breakfast and then those who did not, to see how it affected energy balance. And over the course of 2 studies, he recruited a group of lean individuals and a group of obese volunteers and randomly assigned them either to eat breakfast every day or to fast in the morning for a period of 6 weeks. And so with the breakfast group, they were simply given a calorie target to hit. But since this was a free living study, they allowed them to self-select what they would have for breakfast and what they made those calories out of. And so when they looked back on the dietary recalls and on their logs, they saw that most of them had a high carb breakfast. And the results of this study found that those in the breakfast group increased their levels of physical activity across the whole day, especially in the morning. And the average increase in physical activity increased their total daily energy expenditure by an average of 440 more calories per day in the breakfast eating group as compared to the breakfast skipping group. So skipping breakfast could potentially reduce your energy expenditure for the day. And now that's, in the course of 2 studies, they've seen that. However, there's other research that have looked at the effect that skipping breakfast has on our physical activity levels and throughout the course of the day, and has described this as a compensatory mechanism to defend against the energy deficit that has been created by skipping a mealtime in which you'd usually be taking in energy. So what ends up happening is your body compensates for not taking in energy during that first meal or during breakfast by down regulating your physical activity levels to conserve energy. Whereas when you eat breakfast, you're putting more energy into the system, and thus you're more likely to move around and engage in spontaneous activity. And when they look at this in controlled trials, what they see is it's not that people are going and eating breakfast and exercising. It's that they're engaging in more NEAT, which is something we've covered multiple times. So you're putting energy into the system and your body's netting energy out. So we have to realize that energy balance, or the concept of calories in, calories out, they're innately tied. So when you put more calories in, you're more likely to net more calories out. And this is where just simply incorporating both breakfast, and it doesn't have to be that breakfast has to be an early morning meal, just within a few hours of waking that you consume something, especially a high protein breakfast is especially beneficial, not only from a thermic effective feeding perspective, but also it's been shown to help with blood glucose levels throughout the course of the day and increasing insulin sensitivity, as protein has a nutrient partitioning effect. So just by leveraging some of the things that we've spoken about in terms of meal timing and nutrient timing, and starting your day off, within the first few hours of waking with a high protein breakfast, first of all, and then second of all, with a consistent eating pattern, you will net out more calories per day and you'll burn more calories both through the thermic effective feeding and also through physical activity energy expenditure.
I have a question for you. What is how soon upon waking do you like your clients to eat? Are you saying like don't go more than 2 or 3 hours? Are you saying like the moment you get hungry? What kind of advice do you give them to do?
So I don't get too nitpicky on that. It really depends on the client's schedule. Generally, my general recommendation would be within 2 to 3 hours. Most of the literature we have defines breakfast as the meal that's eaten within 2 to 3 hours awake, but it's really going to depend. Like if someone's an early riser like me, I'm up at 3 o'clock in the morning. You know what I mean? They might not be able to eat till 6 o'clock. So that's a 3-hour window, but generally within the first few hours of waking, I'd recommend getting it a meal, because it's not only from a thermic effective feeding perspective, it's not only from a total daily energy expenditure perspective, but we also have to think about protein feedings and really trying to maximize muscle proteins, building muscle which is the process of muscle protein synthesis exceeding muscle protein breakdown. So when we're sleeping, we're in an extended fast. We're in a catabolic state. So if you've slept 8 hours overnight and say that you didn't eat, you ate your last meal 2 hours before going to bed. So that's a 10-hour window. And now you wait another 6 hours because you're fasting. That's 16 hours that you're essentially in a catabolic state where your levels of muscle protein breakdown are exceeding that of muscle protein synthesis. So you have less of a time period in which you're going to be in an anabolic state where your levels of muscle protein synthesis exceed your levels of muscle protein breakdown and put you in what's called a state of positive protein balance. And that's really what we want for building tissue. So really, we want to break that catabolic state. That's why we're breaking a fast by taking in a meal. And even if it's, a lot of times I'll have certain clients that get up early and they don't like full meals. So I'll have them get a protein shake and maybe a piece of fruit. And that's a simple, easy, accessible, meal where they could not only, stimulate muscle protein synthesis and get that muscle, that anabolic machinery going, but it's also going to help with energy production. It's going to help keep them more active, get their physical activity, just natural, spontaneous physical activity up. And then also the benefits to their blood glucose regulation throughout the course of the day.
I agree with everything you're saying on that. I think within 2 or 3 hours is probably best, unless of course you just have a bunch of gut health issues going on or other things, which is a whole totally different topic. But the last one I wanted to get into is how insulin sensitivity and body fat impact the thermic effect of food. Damn it. I came close there. I will say this, the leaner, the better.
Yes, but that was a guess that you had. We're going to go to the literature on it. So when it comes to insulin sensitivity, those with higher insulin sensitivity, and you're going to find this actually not ironic, but I think you're going to find this shocking. So those with higher levels of insulin sensitivity have been shown to have a higher thermic effect of feeding, whereas those who had lower insulin sensitivity or that err on the side of insulin resistance, or, actually this was just insulin resistance in these particular studies, but we can extrapolate that out to those with type 2 diabetes and diabetes. They experience a lower thermic effect of feeding in response to the same meals. And this is independent of whether those individuals are lean or obese. So if you're lean, but you have insulin resistance, you will still have a lower level of diet-induced thermogenesis or thermic effective feeding, and you will burn less calories in response to a meal. So that's one thing that a lot of people wouldn't expect because they automatically assume, hey, I'm lean, I'm going to have a great thermic effect. No, if you're lean, but you have blood glucose regulation issues and you have insulin resistance, you're going to burn less calories in response to that meal, which a lot of people wouldn't expect.
I actually would see that one being as 100%. That makes sense to me.
Well, most people correlate the fact that they're lean, that they're metabolically healthy, and that's not the case.
That's not true. Yeah, no, that's not true. I've seen some quote unquote lean, healthy people before. I'm like, your blood work's trash. Like that is
absolutely
awful.
It's not everything is. That's why I always say a healthy body is a responsive body, and it's not just about what you look like externally. It's also about that internal physiology and the internal health of the system. And so, also in a study by Siegel, they found that our level of body fat plays an independent role in our thermic effective feeding. So it's been shown that lean individuals have an easier ability to undergo thermogenesis than those with higher body fat levels. So essentially what this means is when lean individuals eat a meal, a percentage of the calories that are consumed are converted into heat through the process of digestion. And this is referred to as a feudal energy cycle. So due to the fact that these calories are turned into heat, due to this diet-induced thermogenesis, they are not stored as fat. However, this process doesn't work as efficiently or effectively in obese individuals, which is why it's important to keep body fat in check. So what's interesting about this line of research is that it's not clear if this is causative or just correlated, but both body fat levels and insulin sensitivity have both been shown to be independent factors that affect our thermic effective feeding. So one of the many benefits of staying both lean and maintaining good insulin sensitivity is that you'll have a higher thermic effective feeding. And this has been shown both in conditions where individuals consume a meal and stay at rest after, and also in conditions where they have individuals consume a meal and then exercise after, which also improves the thermic effect of these meals. And this in and of itself can impact weight loss and weight gain as it relates to your body composition, how nutritious your diet is, and your level of metabolic health. So ultimately with this, with this entire podcast, our real goal was to let you know that and to encourage you, if you're eating whole foods, if you're staying lean, or if you're making sure that your diet is composed of nutrient dense food sources, you're going to have, and that are more unprocessed, you're going to have a better thermic effect of feeding. And there's many different levers within this that we can utilize to increase our total daily energy expenditure. And this just comes down to a matter of choice. Think about all the things that we spoke about. These are all low-hanging fruit that a lot of people don't think about, but it's your food selection, is your timing of your meals, it's your nutrient timing, it's making sure that you have adequate nutrition and nutritional choices. These are all things that every single one of us can leverage to increase our total daily energy expenditure. And people ask me all the time, how do you stay lean year round? And I want to eat more and stay lean. Well, these we're giving you the keys to the castle. If you guys want it, just take these pieces of information, both the research and then also our experience, because look on my Instagram page, you will see tons and tons of lean individuals that stay that way year round, because I'm monitoring their health. I'm putting them through different stages and phases of nutritional periodization to maintain their metabolic health, ensure great insulin sensitivity. I post it almost every day. I mean, Jeff can acknowledge the fact that my blood glucose is always on point. I average this week was an 80.6. So
me and you are always in a race with each other, baby. We're always in a race to get the lowest.
But it's not about the lowest, but it's about being in a great range. And so with that, we're able to stay leaner. We're able to be more efficient in terms of processing our nutrients. We're better able to eat a little bit more food, but stay lean and really enjoy the process, fuel our bodies efficiently, and also maintain the body composition that we both desire. And that's a goal that so many people come to me with, and I really want to help them accomplish.
I will say this from my coaching experience, people monitoring their blood glucose numbers is just probably one of the best, if not the best, biofeedback marker that they could keep track of, because it really opens up their eyes, especially when people are like, because example, I had a client this morning. He came in, he goes, dude, I see why I lose on the weekends. He's like, I have blood sugars in the 140s, 160s, 180s after eating. 2 hours later, I was like, yeah, because you ate too much shit at once. You know what I mean?
Over 180, you're actually spewing sugar out of your kidneys, or you're peeing out sugar.
Yeah, no, you are. Yeah, no, 100%.
That's scary.
Yeah, no, it is, dude. I've seen, I had a client, he started with me, his BGs, no shit, Brandon, in the fasting were in the 200s. And after
he was
meals,
diabetic.
No, he was not diabetic. He had this issue going. So what it turned on to was dude was working night shift, and the doctors couldn't figure that out. And I was like, why don't you go to day shift in your next upcoming schedule shift? And he did, and those numbers, you know what I mean?
Here's the thing with blood glucose. I love it. A lot of people ask me, they DM me every morning. I get these same questions, and it really is client dependent, but I have 95% of my clients monitor their blood glucose, and the 5% that I don't is because it has some psychological effects to them, so they become a little bit overly obsessive to them. And I make sure that all their other blood work parameters, I'm looking at fasting insulin, I'm looking at HbA1c, and I make sure that those are all in a very healthy range. And so monitoring them day to day or week to week with blood glucose isn't necessary, because it's causing more of like, they almost have like a white coat syndrome to it. When they go to monitor, they get dawn phenomenon, it's raised. But blood glucose isn't just about insulin sensitivity. Yes, it's a great indicator of how you're partitioning nutrients and how you're handling the calories that you're currently taking in, but it's also an awareness tool for your stress levels, for your sleep quality, for your overall metabolic health. So it really, it's great when I educate a client about the fact that if they do have a poor night of sleep, we do have research studies, and I'll tell you, because I've been monitoring blood glucose with clients since 2015, I've seen this hundreds of times over the years, that it can raise your blood glucose levels to that of a diabetic. And so, you'll be over 100 milligrams per deciliter in the morning. And it's always amazing when I have a client go out and they have a wild night and they stay up and they don't get a lot of sleep. And then they send me their next, their check-ins the next morning. And they're like, wow, I never realized, because their blood glucose is always on point. And when they see it 15 to 20 milligrams per deciliter above what they're used to, they say, I didn't realize, like, when you would tell me that sleep affected it, that stress levels, that cortisol, that obviously my weight training, my movement, my physical activity, energy flux, all these things impact blood glucose. I was nailing all these other things so that it was in check, but now I see the ramifications of what happens when I don't do that. And that just gives me an awareness tool to say, hey, listen, I can't be perfect on my sleep all the time, but let me try to aim for as good of quality sleep as possible. Let me try to manage my stress as best as possible. I notice that when I'm not hitting my steps for a week or two at a time, my blood glucose climbs. Let me make sure to stay as consistent with my physical activity throughout the course of the day. So it's all these little awareness tools and different things to act as reminders for us to just keep up these positive habits that have both external validation, meaning they make us look better. Internal validation from the perspective of they make us feel better, but also they're allowing our body to operate better. And we see that from an internal health perspective.
I have a question for you. What is the insulin number fasting that you are looking for people to be below? Because
6
you
or
see
under.
a lot. Okay, so 6 or under, because
Yeah,
I've
usually
seen like
I'm
10 or
I'm
under is what they were saying for a while, right? I think that's a little too high. And I
they
was
say
just curious.
24 and under, but
Well, 24
they're
is in the
running.
labs, correct? But
Yeah,
you've seen in
they say
some
20.
books in
No,
literature about 10.
I say 5 to 6 and under. That's where I've seen the people that have, and also we have to realize that, all right, blood glucose is a lagging indicator of your actual insulin sensitivity, because you could have high fasting insulin levels that are driving down your blood glucose. And that's why I do check that on labs. I get that additionally added. So if you're above 6, you're going into 10, that just means, yeah, your blood glucose might be in check and your doctor might be signing off saying, oh, your blood glucose is good, your HbA1c is good, but it's because slowly but surely your fasting insulin is rising too. Because remember, when you have more blood glucose liberated into the blood, you're going to increase the amount of insulin that your pancreas secretes to drive down that blood glucose and get it into cells. So I just feel like that is a higher number than I would want. I want their fasting insulin low. I'll tell you, I'm at 2 or under at all times of the year.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. Now, my next question to you is, how are you resetting people's insulin levels? Do you want to dive on that one real quick? Since we do have like 2-3 minutes, I didn't know if you wanted to give a gloss-over version.
I cannot, my friend. That is a detail-oriented answer first and foremost, and that would take way too much time than either of us have.
Fair. Fair. All right. I didn't know. Okay, cool. Well, where can everybody find you at, B?
Absolutely. So guys, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at @BrandonDeCruz_. Another thing is, guys, if anyone's interested in coaching, I do want to make this very apparent. My website, actually, I should have announced this in the beginning of the show. My website is down right now. It is still active and up. However, my web designer, who I used to have a great relationship with, now works for Tony Huge. So anyone that knows Tony Huge, he's taken my my web designer, and so I can't get in touch with him. I'm not able to get any of the people have been reaching out and saying, hey, I submitted an application for coaching on your website. I'm unable to access any of those, and I'm waiting for him to get back to me from Thailand. So in the meantime, please, if anyone has any coaching inquiries or any email inquiries, please don't go on my website. Please reach out to me via email. I literally live on my email. Jeff can confirm this. So feel free to reach out to me on my email, which is bdecruzfitness@gmail.com.
Yeah, I don't have those problems with my website like Brandon does right now, thankfully. Sorry about that, man. I'll see what I can do to help you out. But if you guys need to get a hold of me, I'm at relentlessforever.com. You guys can hit me up at jeff@relentlessforever.com as well. I am taking a few coach or clients, not too many, but if you're interested and feel you might mesh with my weirdness, then let's get it on, baby. But regardless, you guys can find me on Instagram at JeffUnbreakableBlack, relentlessforever.com, and email me at jeff@relentlessforever.com. B, dude, it was a good one, man. I really enjoyed this. I like how we have like a couple of nuggets we just kind of peel apart and break down, even though we could go down some weird rabbit holes through all these.
And guys, we have a good one coming up next week. It's one of my my favorite topics that we're going to cover, and one that I get more questions about than probably any other. So guys, be ready. We're not going to spoil it yet.
Oh, we're not?
Oh, no, we're not spoiling it. So just, don't say it, but stay tuned. Listen to this one, and we will have another one coming at you guys in 1 week. Thank you for all your support, and God bless.
Yeah, man. Hey, guys, keep sharing. We really appreciate that. Keep tagging. The podcast is growing. Our numbers going up. So we really, really appreciate that. So thanks, guys. You have yourself a good day. Check you.